PS5 jailbreak news update. Now, this is primarily a PlayStation 5 update, but there's a couple of topics I think that are fairly important to mention here for the PlayStation 4, so I'll get those out of the way first for all of the PS4 folks. So first of all, for the PS4 and PS5, there's a new Userland exploit, and this has been released by Earth Onion, which is for the game Don't Starve Together, Console Edition. So of course, this is a game that we were kind of suspecting would become a Userland exploit pretty quickly, because this game was included in a release from Fail Overflow of all of the exploit work that they've been doing on the PS5 a while ago. And once that was released, it was discovered that they were using this game with some kind of Lua save-based exploit. So we now have a proper Userland exploit that's been released for this game. Now, unfortunately, it looks like this exploit will not be able to be a stand-in for the Star Wars Racer Revenge exploit to be able to jailbreak the PS5 up to 12.0, because it does not have the dupe privileged syscall, which effectively means it cannot be used to chain it with the kernel exploit. So unfortunately, this will only really be useful for any new kernel exploits that come out for the PS4 or the PS5 in the future, and we might be able to use it to chain it with any new kernel exploit to jailbreak a higher firmware. So this kind of puts it in the same category as games like Arcade Spirits The New Challengers with the YARP exploit, and the original Lua-based save exploits with the Japanese games. It's in that kind of similar vein there, where it cannot be used to load the net control exploit, but it can be used to load the lapse kernel exploit, which means we could potentially use this to jailbreak up to firmware 12.02 on the PS4, and of course 10.01 on the PS5. But we have other more convenient Userland exploits to use on those older firmwares, so this is really only going to be useful for future jailbreaks for the PS4 and PS5. So the release itself is just a save file, and this is the decrypted save data. So the idea is that you create a save file on your own version of the game, you then decrypt that save file using something like garlicsaves.com, or the Garlic Save Manager on the PS5, or the Apollo Save Tool on the PS4, and then once you have the decrypted save data, you swap out that save data with the one from this release, and then simply re-encrypt that back into a proper save, and install it back on your console, and then when you load up the game and you go to host a game, it should load the exploit. Now, I've been having some trouble trying to get this working on my console, where it's just crashing every time I try to load it, but those issues could be down to me using the digital version of the game, whereas this version of the exploit was targeted for the physical release, so there might be some differences there. But yeah, anyway, so we do have a Userland exploit. Now, another thing for the PS4 and PS5 is that we have this new DNS server that was released by Al-Aziv. So this Chukei PS4, Chukei PS5. So the idea behind this is it's similar to Nano DNS from Earth Onion, which is also available for PS4 and PS5, but it's mainly designed to solve one of the main problems we have on the PS4 and PS5, which is DNS hijacking. So if we take a look at the description here from Al-Aziv, it says it's a lightweight DNS relay server. It provides DNS over HTTPS functionality to bypass DNS hijacking by ISPs and other network intermediaries, while offering domain filtering capabilities to block unwanted connections like system updates and telemetry. So the big problem we've had for a long time on the PS4 and PS5 is that the way to block updates while providing an internet connection has been to just use one of the public DNS servers like Nomadix DNS, which is 62.210.38.117. But if you enter that as your DNS address, there is something called DNS hijacking, where your ISP, your internet service provider, either at the router level or at the ISP level, can actually hijack your DNS requests and force all of them through the ISP's DNS. So no matter what you specify on your PS4, it effectively ignores it and forces it through a normal DNS server, which does not block any of the system updates or game updates. So you could end up accidentally updating your firmware or updating, the PlayStation View application so that you can't use it to jailbreak. So the way that this fixes it is that you set up your internet connection and set a manual DNS of 127.0.0.1 on your PS4 or PS5. And then that basically blocks the internet connection. So even if you try to go to any website, it will fail to load, but that also blocks system and game updates. However, when you run this payload, it seems to run a local relay server on the console itself, which will then relay all the traffic and allow internet access on the console. So you can see I'm able to load Google, but it also filters for any update links and prevents any of that traffic from going through. So it continues to block your system and game updates. So I have access to Google. I'm able to access the internet when I'm running the payload, but I cannot access any game updates or system updates. Those remain blocked. So that way, when you're not running the jailbreak, everything is blocked. And then when you are running the jailbreak and you load this payload, then just the system updates and game updates are blocked, but you have internet access for all of your homebrew applications and any payloads and anything that require an internet connection. So hopefully something like this can be turned into a plugin that can be loaded by Gold10. Whenever the jailbreak is loaded, this payload will automatically be loaded with it, or we might see it get integrated as part of Gold10 itself in a new Gold10 release. So that's something that we can hopefully look forward to so that you don't have to load this payload separately. Unfortunately, that's all I've got for the PS4, but we do have some big updates now for the PS5 to get into. So one of the other big updates we have for the PS5 is we now have the homebrew enabler that uses the Hypervisor exploit from firmware 1.0 to 4.51, which has now been released. So it says a homebrew enabler hen for PS5 supporting firmware 1.0 to 4.51 based on a hypervisor exploit chain, which means we can use this instead of kstuff up to firmware 4.51. If we go to the releases section, it is a development build at the moment, so it's definitely not ready for end users yet. I would not switch over to this right now, wait for a full release. Part of the reason for that is the way that you have to load this is that it cannot be loaded through normal payload injectors yet. You have to use a socat command. If you want to test it out, I recommend this version of socat for Windows by Tech128. You can just go to the code, download it as a zip file, extract that over to your computer, and then you basically just copy the PS5HEN payload from the release right here. You download the ELF file and copy it into that folder for socat. And then you can open up a terminal window in that location, change it to command prompt with CMD. Then you just enter this command right here and change the PS5's IP address to the IP address of your PS5. You need to run the jailbreak on your PS5. Obviously, do not run kstuff or eta-hen. Just load the standard jailbreak with the ELF loader. And once the ELF loader is running, you can then go ahead and run that command on your computer, which will send the hen payload over to your console. And if it works successfully, you should get a notification after a few seconds popping up showing PS5HEN is loaded. And that means you have got the hypervisor exploit successfully running on your console from 1.0 to 4.51. So a huge step forward for those firmwares, and this could also be a step further towards getting Linux running on the PS5 now that we have a proper release of the hypervisor exploit, although it is still, like I say, a development build right now. Wait for the full release before switching over to this permanently. And speaking of Linux, the Flow has posted an update showing that he now has M.2 support working on Linux on the PS5. So once Linux gets released, we should be able to install an M.2 drive in the console and have that M.2 drive working when we're running Linux on the console, which is fantastic. So that's another thing to look forward to once Linux releases. And now that we actually have a working version of the hypervisor exploit released, that could be pretty soon. So moving on, we also have a big improvement to the Blu-ray exploit for the PS5. So this is the version of the Blu-ray exploit that you can unlock on higher firmwares to be able to load it up to firmware 12.0. But obviously you need another jailbreak to be able to unlock the Blu-ray jailbreak after 7.61 when it was patched. So we have an update here from Mass0 or Mass00, and this is a highly optimized version that runs the exploit much faster than previous implementations. As you'll see here, I'm using the regular BD unjailbreak ISO with the jar loader, and then I go ahead and send the payload over. There's two payloads. There's payload.jar, which just runs the ELF loader, and then there's the autoloader version, which also will execute any payloads that you have in your autoloader config on the data folder or the USB drive. So that's the version that I'm running here. And when I inject the payload, you can see how quickly it runs through the exploit. The exploit's already loaded and it's already killed the Blu-ray drive application, and we're just waiting for it to regain a signal. And by the time it regains the signal, it's already gone ahead and loaded shadow mount and kstuff. So we have the jailbreak fully set up and running here on the PS5. I should also mention that the Lua Core exploit with Star Wars Racer Revenge also has an autoloader that you can use to be able to just automatically load the payloads as soon as you run the exploit. But generally, it's so much faster now to use the Blu-ray version of the exploit that it's definitely recommended that once you have the jailbreak set up with Star Wars Racer Revenge, you should unpatch the Blu-ray jailbreak and then use that version to jailbreak your console, because it is much faster, providing you have a way of burning a Blu-ray disc, of course. So next we have the ChronicLoader for the PS5, and this is a new payload that can be used to automatically update all of your autoloader payloads, so that you don't have to manually update them every time there's a new release for one of the payloads that you have in your autoloader. You can just have this ChronicLoader automatically update the payloads for you. Now, the way it works is that you have this HTML file that you can run, and then you can adjust the configuration from there and add your different GitHub repos. So you want to add a repo and then add the releases link, the link to the releases section of your payloads. In this case, I'm using the FTP server repo. So I add that repo in, I can analyze it so I can tell it exactly which payload I want it to update from this repo, which is going to be the PS5 FTP server payload, along with any other payloads that I want to auto load. So I'll also add shadow mount. It can do zip files as well. So I can also just add shadow mount to the shadow mount.zip. And then I'll also, of course, add kstufflite as well and get that one added. So once I have all of the payloads added in here, I can then download the JSON file, and that is the config file. And then you just create a ChronicLoader folder inside the data folder on your internal storage with FTP and copy that JSON file that you downloaded into that folder. Once you've done that, you can then just send the payload, the chronicloader.elf file. And to show how this works, I'm even going to delete the PS5 autoloader folder off my console. So I don't even have one on my console at all, no autoloader. And then when I go ahead and run the ChronicLoader, you can see it automatically downloads all of the payloads that I added into the config from those repos and creates the autoloader folder and adds them all in so that when I run the jailbreak, it will load all of those updated versions of the payloads. And you can even add the ChronicLoader elf file into your autoloader folder as well. So as soon as you run the jailbreak, it automatically runs the autoloader, checks all of the different repos, and downloads any new payloads that have been updated into your autoloader folder and then executes them. And then your autoloader will execute those payloads next. So you're always loading the up-to-date payloads on your PS5. So a great new project there as well. And last but not least, of course, we also got the release of VoidShell version 3.0 beta, which adds so many new features to VoidShell. Now, VoidShell can be used as a standalone jailbreak payload because it includes kstufflite built in. So you can just load VoidShell and nothing else, and it will load the jailbreak. And also, of course, it has the shadow mount functionality to mount your PlayStation 5 game dumps, as well as a web panel that you can access from another device on the same network. And you can do all kinds of different things with the web panel, remotely launch and close your games, dump your games, access the cheats to enable and disable certain cheats for your games. There's a file manager built in, a package manager to remotely install package files. You've got the payload manager with its own payload autoloader. There's fan speed control, there's Home Assistant integration, there's the ability to offline activate your accounts, sync your system clock on your PS5, and also get your remote play PIN code to connect to your remote play device, and so many other additional features that are all built in here. So definitely an awesome project to check out, but I would not recommend loading it with stuff like ETA-HEN or any other additional payloads right now. It's designed to run standalone, and running it alongside other payloads could cause stability issues right now, particularly things like ETA-HEN. So I would just run it standalone for now if you're going to try it out. And also it's recommended to make a backup file of your console just in case anything happens, because it is, of course, just a beta release for now. So anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed this video.